Hey everybody, thanks for joining us. I am Jason and I'm joined by Brian.
Hey everybody.
Brian and I have been shooting videos most of the morning here. We thought we'd do something new, kind of cool, quick Q&A with the community. So we pulled some questions from some videos that you and I have recently done. Also, we're going to be taking questions from the community because we're live right now. We'll just do our best to answer really anything. Tips, tricks, product related, tank, problems with your tank, doesn't matter. Worst we could say is we don't know.
Yep.
So if you've been wondering anything, feel free to put in the comments and we'll do our best to answer. We also have an exclusive because this is our first live Q&A. We're doing 25% off the quarter gallon size of ROX carbon. That is while we're here only. So BRStv 25% off, quarter gallon of carbon, only while you see us right now.
Awesome. Awesome. Yeah, that's really cool.
All right. So again, we pulled some questions ahead of time. I've got a really good one here that's come up really from the beginning of my time here at BRS. So I started here at BRS in the customer service department for many, many years. Hoof-hearted 1102 came at us with, oh crap, I've been doing everything I can to reduce my phosphate to 0.03. I've never heard anyone say to have 0.1. Maybe that's where I'm going wrong. So let's kick it off with a good old-fashioned nutrient talk.
Go for it.
All right. So from the time I started up until this very moment, it's always been everyone trying to chase numbers, 0.03, whatever it is. Every tank is different. Do not try to chase numbers. Same with pH, nutrients, doesn't matter what it is. If your tank's looking good and it's 0.05, if it's 0.1, a lot of the misconception back when I very first started was you want it as low as possible. That's really not the case anymore. I mean, now we're dosing phosphate, we're dosing nitrate.
Yeah, the whole zero nutrient thing. There are people out there that have those ultra low nutrient systems, and that's fine if they want to dose that. But yeah, for the most part, we've pretty much debunked the whole zero nitrate, zero phosphate thing. It's just, there's no point in driving down to that point, and honestly, you're going to drive yourself crazy in a lot of cases. And you know, as we know, especially if you're looking at like coral color and things like that, a little bit of that nutrient can really help out. So, 0.1, you know, you'll start to, if your phosphate starts to rise, you're going to start seeing some, you know, maybe some negative effects, but there's always ways to buffer that out. I think the key is, like you said, whether you're at 0.05, 0.1, whatever it is, just trying to keep it stable. Don't let it, you know, spike. That's what you want to try to avoid.
Exactly. So keep it stable. If you're not dealing with algae issues or whatnot, I wouldn't worry about it at all. If you're consistently testing 0.1, your tank looks good, your corals look healthy, then 0.1 is the spot for the tank. Just try to maintain it there.
Yeah. If it's not broke, don't fix it. Right?
Exactly. You're going to hear that a lot today because we have the same philosophy. If it's not broke, don't fix it.
Yeah.
If it's working, we don't touch it.
Yeah. It's just that the best tanks I've ever had were the ones that I barely touched. So.
All right, so we got one of our first questions. It says, is it possible to make marine setup without water changes? Oof.
Yeah, you know, it is, and this is something that's gone around, you know, a lot. And I've been seeing that quite a bit. You know, folks talking about that no water change thing. Now, I'll admit, back in the day, there was one of the local fish store that I worked at growing up was a big proponent of not doing water changes, actually. So it's kind of funny. It was like, that was the dogma that I followed, and then I started doing water changes. And I think it really just depends on the system. And I think that's what everybody needs to understand going into this. Every system's going to be different. Every body situation, how you're going to manage your tank, the time you have to spend with it, what you're stocking it with, all of that stuff is going to, you know, have an impact on what you need to do to your tank. If you know you're feeding heavy, or if you know you're depleting nutrients and you're not dosing those nutrients or those trace elements back in, then, you know, water changes are going to be necessary. They really are, right? Because that's one of the biggest things. We have the filtration, we have the technology, we have the additives. You know, you can do, you know, what is it, the moonshine methods, or you can do the ICP-MS, you know, the mass spec testing on your water to find out exactly what minerals or what elements you have in your water and what capacity, and you can dose to replenish those. So
that's really the only way I would do a non-water change tank is if I was doing ICP testing consistently. I was running something like Triton where I'm replacing trace elements. Otherwise, I will say that with every tank I've ever had, when I get lazy and I don't do water changes, everything starts to go downhill pretty quickly.
Sure.
So I would be a proponent of consistent water changes. You know, they're not fun, right? Nobody looks forward to their next water change. We always used to say barbecue is always better than a water change. So if you're gonna do it, ICP tests, something like the Triton method where you're replacing trace elements would be the only way I'd recommend it.
Right. Or if you've got a system where it's not going to be pulling those nutrients out, like if you don't have a lot of coral and things like that, you know, you could probably go a lot farther between, or a lot longer between your water changes, and it's not going to cause you a problem. But, you know, again, it's case by case. You know, I know people that swear that, oh, I've never done a water change. Great. If that's working for you and everything in your tank is happy and you're happy with it, awesome.
There you go. Again, consistency is key.
Yep.
And if it's not broke, don't fix it.
100%.
All right, we've got another one. How do I get a NEM to move?
Yeah, that's kind of a tough one. I mean, and I don't know if you've had much experience trying to get them to move.
I have.
Yeah, I've had poor experience trying to get them to go where I want. It's usually, if I know I'm going to put an anemone in a tank, it's usually one of those things that I add very early on.
Yep.
Because I want it to find its home, get happy, and then I'll build everything else around it, right? And for that reason, I usually don't put anemones in my tanks because they're just a pain, in my opinion. That's my opinion. That's my level. That's what I like to do. If I do have an anemone tank, it's going to be like a specimen tank, like a clownfish tank with, you know, with a nice big anemone in it. But no, I just don't like to deal with it. So.
Okay, so I totally agree. If you're going to have an anemone, put it in your tank right from the beginning because it's going to go where it wants to go. But then also keep in mind it's going to move whenever it wants to move. So you can't really get it to go where you want it to go. But if you want to move it, basically you have to stress it out. So put a power head, change your flow, put a power head facing it, and not enough to cause any real damage, right? But changing your flow will cause it to move to a new position where it's more favorable for it.
Yeah, you set up your aquarium. You know that it doesn't want a lot of direct flow. It wants to find a nice crevice in the rock. So if you've got a lot of places like that on the back side of your rock structure where you don't want it, hey, it's going to find a nice spot back there and hang out. Guarantee it's going to pick the spot you don't want it to go. So
I want to give a shout out to Greg Carroll. Greg, thanks for watching. We see you here. And then we also have another, so we're just going to like rapid fire these questions. I want to answer as many questions as we can. Again, I don't know if we've ever done this. Brian and I have definitely never done this.
What's that? The live stream?
Yeah, live Q&A.
No, absolutely not. No, this is definitely the first time, you know, so I just really started doing these videos with BRS a few months ago, so really exciting, but this is just I think a cool opportunity for us to get, you know, to know people out there, and they can, you know, ask us whatever they want. You want to ask Jason some questions about his personal life. He likes long walks on the beach and all that. So.
I do love the beach.
He does absolutely.
I don't really like walking, but I like the beach. I don't think neither Brian or myself do a lot of walking. After adding live sand to a new tank, do I have to get saltwater added as soon as possible, or can I add gradually?
Do I get saltwater added as soon as possible?
Yep, because live sand, live sand already wet.
Yeah, so after adding live sand to a new tank, sorry, I was reading another one while you were talking about
okay.
that.
Again, we've been shooting videos all day.
We're all over the place here. So do I have to get the saltwater added as soon as possible, or can I add it gradually? So just keep it wet. If there's going to be some reason that you can't fill your tank up all the way, you know, right at first, it's fine. Just make sure you keep it wet. It can't dry out. If it dries out, that everything in there is going to die. So you're kind of defeating the purpose there. So keep that moisture in there. Allow that bacteria to stay alive, and you should be good to go.
Yep. Yeah, there's really not more to be said about that.
Yeah.
Add enough water to meet the top of the sand bed, and you're set for really as long as you want.
Right.
Oh, what else do I have? Ooh, a good one. How do I get my octopus to eat?
How do I get my octopus to eat? Ask him nicely. No.
Yeah, honestly, I've never kept an octopus. This might be our first. I don't know.
No, I've done cuttlefish.
Okay.
Never octopus, and mainly just I've stayed away from cephalopods, or in general, just because they just have a low lifespan. And I know myself, I'll get very attached to that creature, and then I'll know that it's going to like die in a year or two, and that will just make me very sad. So, but it's really just try offering it different foods. If it's not eating, sometimes they just won't. But I would look up, like Jason said, I'm definitely not an octopus expert, so I would look up maybe some online videos. Again, scour YouTube. There's got to be some folks out there that are keeping octopi with some, success. So see what they're doing.
Great question. The first one to stump us.
Yeah. It won't be the last one, I'm sure.
All right, so my green slimer is not as green. What could be wrong?
Green slimer's not as green. What could be wrong? So there's a lot of things, right? So, I mean, sometimes it's just as easy as you don't have the right spectrum of lighting. It could just be your, and it depends on what you're comparing it to, is right? So if you're comparing it to somebody specific online, and you want to kind of see what they're doing and emulate that, if that's what you're going for. But usually it's a combination of a lot of things. It's a combination of light, it's a combination of water quality. I'm not saying your water quality is bad, it's just probably different than maybe the water chemistry, I guess is a better way of saying it, than what maybe that store, that dealer, that grower is keeping their water chemistry levels at. So, your nitrates may actually be low, because I've had that happen, where I'm like, man, why do my corals all look really kind of faded out? They just don't look as vibrant. And honestly, it's because my nutrients too low. So I throw some fish food in there and keep that up, and try to bump that up, but don't spike it up. Just, pay attention to that, dose some nutrient, whatever it is. But really just test your water, see what's going on, and try to get things leveled out. Yeah,
I would agree. Typically, like pale or washed out colors are, again, going to be limited nutrients, something like that. You can be very specific. You can test your phosphate. If that's too low, you can dose phosphate specifically or nitrate. But honestly, a really easy thing that we've already done testing on is amino acids. We did a ton of testing on Brightwell's coral amino. So if you're not currently dosing food for your coral, maybe try that. It's an easy way to get it going.
Yeah, also, grab yourself a par meter too. If you got a buddy that's got one, or a local fish store, get a hold of that. Make sure it's getting the right amount of par. Green slimers are one of those ones that are super forgiving. So you may just be, giving it a little bit too much or not quite enough, and it's just not quite the color you want it to be. So maybe check out the lighting, check out your color spectrum and the blue cycles, and make sure that you got everything where you want it. So.
Also keep in mind, if you're comparing from the time you put it in the tank till now, then the advice that we just gave you is really a good way to go with testing your nutrients, adding amino acids. However, if you're comparing it to something you see online, keep in mind a lot of those are altered in some way or another.
Yeah, you could grab your phone, take a picture of that green slimer in your tank and make it look however you want it to.
Exactly.
So keep that in mind. If you're comparing it to what it used to look like in your tank, then you have to start asking yourself, what did I change? And sometimes that's a very small thing. Like literally, I had a fish die and I removed him, and now you might be feeding less, and so now your nutrient levels are lower. So it could be something very, very simple, but just start asking yourself that question, what did I change in my aquarium?
Exactly. So if you're just joining us, Brian and I have been shooting videos all day. We thought it'd be super cool to go live, and we're doing a Q&A. So ask us any questions. Again, product, tips, tricks, techniques, doesn't matter what it is, and we're going to try to answer as many as we can in the amount of time we have. And, good point. Okay, so Brian and I put our heads together. We've got 25% off the quarter gallon RX Carbon, and that's only while we're live here. Only the quarter gallon, 25% off. BRStv 25 is the code. Let's get into another question.
And that's just really a thanks, guys, for just tuning in and throwing in some questions and stuff. So just wanted to make sure we show you guys our appreciation.
Yeah, we have no shortage of questions. Really appreciate the interaction here. Next one up says, new tank. I only have nitrifying bacteria, Prodibio. I have no product to add ammonia. How should I add ammonia? Don't want to do fish in cycling method.
So there's lots of things. You don't have to do a fish and cycling method. I know that's become kind of popular, and it was popular a long time ago too, right? You throw a couple damsels in your tank or something, and then later on you kick yourself because you can't get them out, and you hate them because they kill everything else. So I don't recommend that just because it's a pain. But throw some food in there, right? I mean, a little bit of mysis shrimp, a little bit of mysis shrimp goes a long way to kicking off a cycle in an aquarium, right? There are also some great additives that are cycling the tank, adding some nitrifying bacteria and everything to the system and getting that going. And it's really just to get that bacterial cycle and those bacteria growing into the rock and in the sand and getting that cycle process started so that you can, so it can start kind of taking care of it. So you're building an ecosystem out of nothing. They're taking a bunch of dead things and making an ecosystem out of it. So one of the first starts there is bacteria and getting that in there. So
totally agree. If you have fish food, use fish food. If you don't, I've used frozen shrimp out of my freezer that I was going to eat. Or really any seafood, squid, scallops, doesn't matter what it is, just throw a little chunk in there.
It really doesn't matter as long as it's not going to be toxic to something that you're going to throw in there.
All you're trying to do is get something to decompose in that tank.
It really doesn't matter. Yeah, if if a buddy of yours that has a saltwater tank is like, oh, I had a little, a goby or something die, you can toss that in there. It doesn't really matter, as long as it's going to break down and add some nutrient to the tank.
That's a new one. I mean,
it's a terrible way.
If you can get your hands on
I mean, it sounds a little morbid, but I've done it before. Like, oh, hey, I know just what to do with that. I'll cycle that tank with it.
We'll put Brian's number in the comments if you need a dead goby. Yeah. But for now, we'll go on to the next one. Okay, James Herring says, what can I do for hair algae that's taking over my tank? I love this question. It's consistently the most asked question I received in customer service. Everyone goes through it at some point.
Well, I'll tell you, it's a great question, and I'll tell you one reason it's a great question. Well, you mentioned it, but also personally, I'm battling it right now in one of my little nano tanks. So I've got an SPS nano tank, 15 gallon, and yeah, I had a hair algae outbreak in there. And the answer is it's a slow process, right? There's a lot of different things you can do, and actually, I think we had a BRStv video out about that recently, right? So. Check that out because it's got a lot of good information in it. But in the end, it's a bit of a slow process, right? It's a little bit of manual removal, making sure you're not overfeeding, so limiting that nutrient flow, providing other algae and other mediums that are going to absorb some of those nutrients, so starving out that hair algae. So it really is a slow battle. Don't expect it to disappear overnight for you. If it disappears overnight, probably a lot of things in your tank are going to disappear overnight because you've just killed them. So yes, slow battle. I've got mine on sort of the backswing. It's all dying off now. I've just got a few little patches left of it, but it was really just, getting my nutrient really low, which my coral hasn't liked, but it's killing the hair algae, doing some manual removal, adding some more herbivores in there, some like snails, Mithrax crabs, whatever it's going to be, and just biding your time.
Yep, the manual removal piece is key. It's the worst part. Every time I have this issue, right? I remember my first tank here. I was still adapting, like taking care of a tank at the office versus at my home where I can see it a lot more often.
Difference.
Exactly. And everything was manual removal. And I was like, I don't want to do that. So I just didn't do it. And I tried everything else and nothing worked because as you're killing off the algae with all the other techniques, it's just putting the nutrients back into the water.
Right.
So you're just fighting yourself. So the biggest key to getting this under control, get as much out as possible. Don't be lazy like me with it. Really spend like a couple hours. It's a pain. It takes a while. If you have a filter sock sump set up, then scrub it with a toothbrush off the rocks, even as far as that. If it's long, you can pull it off with your hands. But get as much into the filtration system and then change that out as soon as you're done.
Yep, that's exactly what I did just about a week ago, actually. I used a pipe cleaner and just got in all the little sections of the rock and then had a filter sponge just collecting all that stuff. So,
yeah, and again, it's not fun.
No, it sucks.
But that's the way to get past it.
It's awful.
And then as far as preventing it, make sure the tank is stable. Dr. Tim's makes a really cool product. They make these waste away gels that you can just toss in the tank. Those are cool because, again, I don't want to have to do it every day or every other day. Right. So I like the gels. Bacteria stability is key once you get it under control.
Yeah, and once you see it on that backswing, once you see it starting to die off, that's the worst time to ignore it. Like, now's the time you've got it on it's dying back, really hit it hard at that point. So don't back off of it.
Exactly. We've got one from Mexico.
Ooh, I like this one.
Says, greetings from Mexico. One question, if I'm only going to have a tank for frags, do I need a skimmer for that one? No fish.
Yeah, that's a great question. And this would be a question that varies significantly between people that you ask, right? Because there are people out there like, you have to have a protein skimmer on everything. Yep. I'm not one of those people. One of the things I like to talk about, there's no right way to do this. There's no right way to do, there's not one prescribed way to do a saltwater aquarium, right? So do you have to have a protein skimmer on an aquarium at all? No, you don't. There are things you have to remember and take into account for that, right? So it's not going to be pulling certain nutrients out of the water. If you're not going to have any fishes in there, you're probably going to be wanting to dose some nutrients in there because you're not going to be feeding it. They're not going to be producing waste. So keep that in mind. If you're only going to be growing coral frags in that, there's probably going to be some additional work that you have to do on the backside of that. Honestly, it's probably easier for you to just add a fish or two and feed them, lightly and have a protein skimmer on there or not. But either way, in the long run, personally, I would, but it's not necessary. I mean, I ran my first Reef tank ever, which was a 125-gallon SPS Reef. I ran it with no protein skimmer for years. Sure. So it's possible.
I would not. I wouldn't bother with it. I would probably run biological media, some carbon. I want a lot of control. If I'm running a frag tank, I want a lot of control. I want to dose what I want to dose. I don't want to worry about the adding fish and having fish food. And if that's the case,
it depends on size too, right? So,
true.
you know, are we talking like a 40 breeder or a 20 long, or are we talking like a, you know, 100-gallon tank that we've got frags in, right? Because that's going to be a big difference there too. If it's in that smaller range, I'm right there with you.
Yeah, exactly. So I would look into some sort of coral nutrition method, whether it's KZ or Red Sea, no matter what it is. And my recommendation again would be like carbon, biomedia, and something to feed the corals, and save the money on the skimmer for more corals.
Yeah, absolutely.
There we go.
Right. I like this is a great question, and back in the day, this had an easy answer to it. But John Williams looks like did a great job. How do I get more purple coral and algae? I have lots of green. Easiest way to get more coral and algae for me, I mean, there's multiple methods now, but the one is harder than it used to be, right? Used to, I would say, find yourself just a gnarly piece, a beautiful piece of real good live rock that's got a bunch of purple coral and algae on it, toss it in your tank. Maybe you've got, again, if you've got a buddy in the reefing hobby, see if they'll give you a piece of Rebel or, you know, whatever the case may be, something from their sump. It doesn't matter, right? If it's got some really nice coral and algae on it, grab that, put it in your tank. Even if it's just for a period of time, put it in there for like a month, take it back out. Doesn't matter. It's going to start spreading some of that coral and algae throughout the tank. You can also buy some of the bottles of coral and algae booster now that will help out with that. But
nothing really to argue with that one. I would use this as another excuse to go buy more coral and pick out a plug with a lot of coralline algae on it.
Another great
That's what
option.
I would do.
Yeah, right.
And then just elevate calcium alkalinity levels. Make sure they're staying, you know, stable where you want them, and that'll help you.
Yeah, if you've got coral in there that's growing happily and it's producing a skeleton, you know, then that coral and algae can do it too.
It does take a while though. I mean, a lot of the tanks here, before you see that really nice, like taking over look, a year plus.
Yeah, in some cases, yeah. I mean, you'll start seeing little spots of it, but it does take a while in some cases. Again, now more than it used to be, because you used to just get all live rock. Like when I'd fill an old tank with Fiji live rock, and that thing would just turn purple in a few months, you know. But it takes a while. Just be patient. Make sure everything's happy, and yeah, best way to add it is to find some and throw it in there.
There you go. All right, here we go. All right, we're gonna see if we can stump Brian, because I'm already stumped. Paco says, my butterfly fish is not eating, trying live mussels, clams, but nothing. Only I feel like eating them. What can I try?
Yeah, so this isn't gonna be a great one for me to answer either. There was actually a video that I know was done in the past talking about, you know, quarantining fish and only buying fish. Like if you want something like a butterfly fish, the best recommendation I have is to buy it from some place where you know it's already eating prepared foods and it's already eating that stuff and it's acclimated to that already. Because in some cases these fish just, especially if they're wild caught, they're just not going to. And I don't want to be disheartening, but it is very difficult. So keep trying different things. If you've got a nice mature coral or reef tank, there's probably some stuff around in the tank that he's going to be picking at. So keep that in mind. He is probably getting some nutrition, maybe just not as much as he needs. So I don't know if you've got any other suggestions for it.
So what I would try, just in general for picky eaters that are not taking to frozen or pellet or flake, is it's like $35. It's the, I forget the brand, but it's brine shrimp hatchery. We have eggs. You can get eggs really anywhere, but we've got eggs. And try live baby brine shrimp, because it's fun. It's healthy for everything in your tank, even not just the picky eaters. It's just a really good thing. Plus, it's like keeps you active with your tank. So I would try a brine shrimp hatchery.
Yeah, some live food is a good option because it's also going to trigger that feeding mechanism in a lot of picky fish because they're like, oh, there's something actually swimming around and running from me, right? So, and having a good population of amphipods, gammarids, and things like that in your tank can also help. So.
Yep. Agreed. John Williams is back again, says, what's the best skimmer for 100-gallon? I'm just going to take this one.
You're going to take that one.
Okay, so again, we've been filming videos all day. Sneak peek, something's coming out around skimmers. And both Brian and myself had our first interaction with a max spec skimmer. I didn't understand the dual inlets and the dual air intakes. I didn't understand it at all. We broke that thing in
like 30 seconds.
On camera in 20 to 30 seconds. There was no micro bubbles. It just started running. So for your 100-gallon tank, the max spec, which I'm looking at it right now, it's over there. The max spec skimmers with the dual, and I think it's a max spec jump skimmer. I would take a serious look at those because I am extremely impressed after the video we did.
I mean, we had it dialed in a little tank, and we poured a little skimmate in it, and it was like in 30 seconds, it was.
We were expecting to have to wait 20 minutes or something like that all of a sudden. And then we had to add more because it was gone.
Yeah.
It was, so super impressed by those. It was our first time interacting with it, and it was great.
Yeah, really fun.
And so we're going to make sure to send you home with one today, too.
Oh, nice guy. You mean me or them?
Oh, no, you. Okay. Rusty says, any idea how much GFO would take to reduce phosphates from 5+ parts per million down to 0.5? I've been making progress, but it seems to be taking a crap ton.
Great question. I mean, the first thing I'd say there is it's going to depend on your water volume, right? I mean, if the bigger your tank, it's going to take you longer. And if you're feeding constantly, if you've got a really strong feeding regimen, you're fighting a losing battle there. So it may not be just adding GFO. You may have to start looking at other things that you're doing to add phosphate to the aquarium to start dialing those back. And again, what I would work on is dialing that back, as far as you can. You don't have to get to 0, but start working on getting that dialed back. However it is, if you start seeing it decline, don't get too aggressive with it. Let it just keep dropping. And then when you get it there, just try to keep it there, right? Keep running GFO. Maybe be a little more strict on your feeding, things like that. So.
Yep. So Rusty, I'm gonna try to save you a ton of money. As soon as you put that GFO in there at 5+ parts per million, within hours it's gonna be exhausted.
Done.
And it's gonna go through a ton of GFO. So I would use GFO to keep your phosphates in check. But assuming there's not phosphate leaching into your water change water, do water changes, because otherwise you're just going to spend a fortune on GFO trying to correct this.
So there's a great point, and I think that was a question that we had from one of our previous videos, right? Was a question about phosphates in your RO water, right? Right.
Yep.
So if you've got source water that has a lot of phosphates in it, your RO unit is going to struggle to pull all of that out.
Exactly.
Tips for that.
So phosphate's really hard to remove. Best case for that. So if you are leaching phosphates in your water and you're just adding phosphates through water changes, in that case, run GFO on your water storage because you don't have the same like fish waste and food waste and other sources of phosphorus in your water. So it'll be much more efficient to pull it out of your water change water and do water changes and save a ton of money.
Yeah, so check that. Check the phosphate, check the chemistry of your actual RO unit. Again, throw it in, send it to someplace for a mass spectrometer check, see what's in there. If you got phosphates in there, then start treating not only your replacement water, but your top-off water as well. Just make sure there's no phosphates in that stuff.
That's good advice for everybody. If you can't track down a phosphate issue, start with your RO water.
Check your top-off,
or if you're not using RO water, start using RO water, or even like distilled water if you don't have an RO unit.
Yeah. If you're filling it from the pond out back, stop.
Yeah, especially here. When the tanks go south, we call them Medicine Lake is a lake near here. That looks pretty rough. We call them Medicine Lake.
Medicine Lake? Nice.
Yep. Lord Thornton Eddington says, what do you guys think of the
like
future of automated testing looks like?
Well, I mean, so there aren't a lot of them out there right now, and the ones that are out there are pretty expensive. And coming from I started reefing when I was in high school and college, so everything I did was on the cheap. I did the cheapest possible, I was the hillbilly reefer.
Well, that was a long time ago.
It was. Thanks for that. Thanks for that. It was a long time ago.
A lot's changed.
Yeah, back in my day.
Okay.
So yeah, it was a long time ago, but everything was done really cheap. And so the one thing I could say, the future of, it's just like anything else, right? It's just like if we look at LED lights, anything like that. When LED lights first started coming out in the hobby, they were economically impossible. I mean, you just couldn't afford to get one. They were just so crazy, right? And now they're starting to dial back a little bit. And you can get them, there are some that you can get out there that are a lot cheaper. Again, sometimes that comes with a quality decline, but if you're a reefer on a budget, you're willing to accept some of that. So my guess for the future, there's some really great products out there right now. They are very expensive. So the future, what you're going to see is probably a greater diversity in those types of products. And in some cases, probably a significant price reduction. But that doesn't necessarily mean it's of the same quality or as good of a product. But that's what I would imagine is that we're going to see more and more of that popping up.
Yep, agreed. I'm all for it. I don't like testing. I want something to do it for me. I want something to test it for me and dose it for me, and I just want to enjoy my tank.
Yeah, water changes,
that's where I'm
feed it, everything, right? Just
yeah.
you just look at your water box and enjoy, right?
Yeah, adjust my feeding schedule based on nutrient levels. Yeah, the whole 9 yards. Greg Carroll's back says anywhere good to eat in the warehouse district of Minneapolis.
I'm not from Minneapolis, so I couldn't tell you that.
Okay, so I'm thinking Dinky Town. I don't know if that's in I don't know the warehouse district. Okay, Dave's behind the camera. Again, Dave's the only reason that we're here. Okay, so I hear a lot about the Smack Shack in the warehouse district, but drive a little further, go to Dinky Town. It's called Loring Pasta Bar. It's phenomenal. The restaurant is super unique. The bathrooms, it sounds weird, but as soon as you go in the bathroom, you'll understand what I'm talking about, are also super unique. Like, I remember the bathrooms as much as I remember
The food's
food.
not memorable, but boy, that bathroom was nice.
The bathrooms are insane. So Loring Pasta Bar, I hope it's still around because I don't live in Minnesota anymore. I live in the great state of Wisconsin. But squidding pasta, get the squidding pasta and check out the bathroom. There you go. Or go to the Smack Shack, which apparently is, everyone's got the rage about the Smack Shack. And that's supposed to be more closer to where you're looking.
Well, there you go. Great question, I guess.
Yeah, I like those questions.
Fire those on. Yeah,
Again, it
bring
can be
on.
anything.
Yeah,
It doesn't have to
anything.
be tech related.
I'm going to take this one. We got Paco, I think again, right? Paco asked another question earlier. ATS, yes. ATS, no. Pros versus cons. So this is, I assume ATS is algae turf scrubber. So near and dear to my heart. Actually, the local fish store that I grew up with and worked in for a good amount of time. We built these and we actually sold these, but it was I think the only local fish store, and we had it. I think it was something like 50 or 60,000 gallons of water total in that thing, but it was all filtered via ATS scrubber, the entire place. And my first reef tank ever was filtered by an algae turf scrubber. Not like the ones today. It was a little bit different, but it was also doubled as a wave maker. It was super cool, and it actually hung on the back of my 125 aquarium. It was great. So the nice thing about it, and I don't know. Like I said, I think a lot of people don't like them because they're a little bit more maintenance maybe, and it's kind of gross scraping that algae off. I loved it. I think if some of the newer ones, I haven't used a lot of the newer ones that are out, but I would definitely try one again. I think they're just spectacular. I think they're great. It's a natural way of removing some of that. It also can help if you've got, it can help with some of the pH swings and things like that. It provides some of the benefits of algae growing in your refugium or your sump with, and doesn't pull quite as much, or just, certain things that like a protein skimmer or other filtration will pull out. The algae scrubber it doesn't, leaves it behind for you.
Exactly. No argument to that, really. There's no arguing their effectiveness. My only gripe rather with turf scrubbers is they're expensive. They're not really easy to adapt towards different size setups because you're stuck with whatever size screen you get is the screen you have. So in that case, I'm more on the refugium side because once you get a light, really can move that light to a tank double the size and it'll still be just as effective. So if it's something you're looking into, they are extremely effective.
I'm a big fan of the natural filtration. So algae, refugium, algae turf scrubber, any of that stuff. I mean, you can almost overdo that in some cases.
Exactly.
And it's like fine, it's fine.
Yeah, and like you said, pH regulation, there's all sorts of benefits to doing it the natural way. Also, it's like a standard refugium. You're talking about a $10 ball of Kato, and you get lice anywhere from like 20 to upwards of $200, $300, $400.
I mean, honestly, my first refugium ever had a $10 Walmart fluorescent light hanging over the top of it, and it grew Callirpa just fine.
T12s.
Yeah,
T12 fluorescence.
There you go.
Exactly. Yep. All right, what do we have? The new Newfish J6. My clownfish has become aggressive. Any tips on correcting their behavior? I've tried a few days in a breeder box, but it didn't work. I don't have a lot of good news here. We have a clownfish, one of these clownfish to be exact, that have been around for years. Actually, as long as I have, and I think years before.
Like 30 years?
You
mean
can't
here?
Yeah, no, I like just entered my 30s. He can't hit me with that. Okay, so these clownfish, one of them is super aggressive. Every time I put my hand in the tank, because I've been in a bunch of different tanks throughout the office, it will bite you. It's just very territorial. We haven't been able to break it. It's just like that's the creature. I really don't have any advice. I think you're stuck with it.
Yeah, I mean, you know, clownfish are one of those fish that they can become very territorial, and especially certain species of clownfish. You know, you get into the primitive, so the maroon clowns, you know, they can get very territorial. Some of the Clarkies, things, same thing. So there are ways of dealing with it, you know, quarantining them to where they're, you know, but giving them plenty of space. If there's a particular fish that they are aggressive toward, quarantine that fish off, not necessarily your clownfish, but quarantine that fish off, even if it's put like an entire divider in the middle of your tank, somehow just to keep them on one side, allow them to kind of get used to each other, and you know, he's on his side and we're on, you know, and give that some time. But unfortunately, sometimes it just doesn't work out. There are some fish that are just aggressive. If there are, again, I know I've seen there's some good YouTube videos out there of people that have managed to get it to work. So do a little bit of scouring and find that on there.
Yep. All right, well, okay, so again, if you're just joining us, Brian and I have been shooting videos all day.
Yep.
We want to do something fresh. So we're doing a live Q&A, answering as many questions as we can.
And we're
And we
giving
got
a discount.
Exactly, quarter gallon BRS ROX carbon, 25% off with BRStv 25, only for the duration of our live. Just something to say, thanks for watching.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, so no more wasted time. J. Lule 812, do you recommend a peroxide dip for frags that have algae? What ratio should be used?
I don't know if you've used it. I don't use peroxide for coral frag dipping. I just use a nice coral dip or an iodine, and I'll give them a nice little scrub. I usually try to remove bases, you know, unless it's a large LPS or something that I can't really do that to. And again, do a nice scrub to, or just use peroxide and dip like a toothbrush in it and give it a scrub like that from the outside. But I don't really have a lot of experience personally using the peroxide dips.
Lucky for you, I do.
Hey.
All right, so I can't help with the ratio because it's been a really long time since I've done this, but years and years ago, we used to do it all the time because especially like on Zoa frags, getting all that hair algae off is like next to impossible. So 100% recommend it. It works phenomenal. Never really had any issues as long as the ratio is right, which again, I apologize, I can't help with, but should be really easy to find online.
Yep.
But yes, hydrogen peroxide specifically for algae works great.
Yeah. I want to go back to Paco threw another question in up there. My aquarium's filling with Valonia. I tried to introduce some Mithrax. We didn't touch this one, did we? No. So yeah, so I tried to introduce some Mithrax crabs, but they do not eat them, which I've had that happen before. People are like, use Mithrax crabs, and they just walk all over the Valonia like, hey, thanks for the nice cushions. Do you recommend, you know, if you use products like the Vibrant, or what do you recommend to do? My corals are collapsing. Great question. You know, Valonia is one of those things that has plagued us from the beginning. It can be a real pain. Sometimes it's nice you just get that one bubble. Never trust the one bubble because he's going to turn into many, many other bubbles later on. So try to deal with it as soon as possible. And I'll tell you what to do. Look up, you know, Thomas just did a Help I Wrecked My Tank feature on Valonia just a little while back. Goes into a little bit more of the biology of the Valonia ventricosa and all that. So take a look at that video. He's got some great tips in that.
We really can't do any more than that. The Thomas video is going to steer
it's
you
great.
right.
He did a good job.
Daddy Hammond says, what's a good breathable cover for fish tanks?
I mean, if you find yourself just a good, you know, mesh cover, I mean, that's probably the best. Are we talking about like a lid so your fish don't jump out? I assume that's what we're
how I
talking
took
about.
it. So we have the BRS kits, which you can DIY. I like those because you can customize them, and they're pretty affordable compared to like other pre-made ones. Also, Red Sea has these, like Red Seas is a notch above. Like ours are, you know, it's the clear screen, but it's your typical like window framing, right? Red Seas is like custom for aquariums. It's nice. It's dark in color, so it blends in well. So it depends what you're looking for. If you're looking for affordable and customizable, I'll go with the BRS one. Otherwise, if you've got like a really high-end setup and you don't have a hood like we do, then check out the Red Sea ones.
Yeah, there you go.
Oh, what do we have? John Williams again. John, Paco, thanks for watching.
Question.
Thanks for all the questions.
Yeah, you guys are doing great.
Love it. How do I treat bristleworms? I hate them, and I'm starting to see them all over the place. Arrow crab got big and started feeding on my scolie.
Yep.
We just talked about this
It's
morning,
really funny,
actually, so take this one.
Yeah, so bristleworms is an interesting one. I guess I'm a little bit old school in that I don't mind them at all, right? I don't have a problem with. Now, if I see one of the big what I would call a fireworm or something like that, one of these guys that, gets like 2 feet long and they're, a half-inch in diameter, then I start to go, maybe you need to come out of there. But for the most part, I like bristleworms. They don't bother me. They'll stab me every now and then, but that's part of the hazard of it. You kind of know that going into it. As far as getting rid of them goes, if they're in your tank now, I mean, honestly, probably not a lot you can do, right? Other than chemical warfare, right? So arrow crabs can help. There are some other things in there that can help, but even the smallest little tiny one will reproduce, and they're just going to keep going. So it's all about trying not to introduce stuff into your aquarium to beginning. I don't know if you've got a different approach on that, but for me, I like bristleworms, so I don't see the problem.
I'm going to wholly back up Brian. Bristleworms are unsightly, but they're getting into every crevice of that rock. I mean, there's really
they're the natural pipe cleaner.
Exactly.
I mean, and for me, it's like I'm building an ecosystem, right? And in ecosystems and in nature in general, nothing's ever perfect, right? There are weeds, like if you're growing a garden or your aquarium, there's always weeds. Like Aperture is a weed, technically, unless you really like Aperture, then it's not a weed. So the same concept, I think, with bristleworms. They could be considered a weed, but I find them very beneficial. I've always thought they were useful in an aquarium, and it's actually something that I've added to tanks on purpose. So if you don't like them, though, the best thing you can do is try really hard not to let them get in there.
Yep, I would agree. I look at it as a pro.
Yeah.
Honestly, unless there's another issue that they're causing you, I'd leave them and just be grateful that they're there.
Yeah.
All right. Again, we're going to try to get as many questions as we can. Sofa King Tired says it's safe to run UV 24/7. 100%. The argument I hear about not running UV 24/7 is typically like you don't want to have a giant impact on the bacteria population in your tank, but a majority of that is located on surfaces anyway, so you're good. Especially because if you're using it to prevent algae or fish diseases, then you really want that running 24/7 anyway. I run all mine 24/7.
Yeah, you're trying to keep the those algae blooms and those diseases out of the water column itself, right? So, like you said, most of the beneficial bacteria that is keeping your tank running and being effective, that's all happening inside the rock, inside the sand bed, if you've got one. So, yeah, I don't see any problem running the UV sterilizers. I know that some people do things a little different. And again, that's a big caveat to all of this, right? And I'm a big proponent that there is no right way to do a reef tank. This is the only way you should do it.
Sure.
There's thousands of different ways. Everybody can do it differently, and it doesn't mean you're doing right. If you're having great results and you're enjoying your aquarium, which is the number one thing, hey, rock on, do your thing. So
I'm going to throw out a hot tip on UV sterilizers because I made a huge mistake with mine, and this is just negligence on my part. Is I had a giant, it was like a 40 watt. I think back when it was Emperor Aquatics, so it was like this big. And what I failed to do is install it properly. So for everyone who's running UV, make sure the outlet is elevated higher than the inlet, because what's going to happen is if you have air bubbles in that thing, it breaks away at the housing. So about a year in to my 40 watt UV sterilizer, I went to change the bulb just as a part of regular maintenance, and I grabbed it and it just crunched apart.
Shattered.
Yeah, so if you're running UV, follow the directions, don't be like me, and make sure the outlet is higher than the inlet so all the air escapes.
I actually think that's a great name for a video, like don't be like Jason. We could just do that. Like that could be a whole series. Actually.
Well, at your age, anything's enjoyable. All right. That's the only joke I got for Brian.
That's great. I actually, there's one down here. I know I'm skipping around a little bit, and we can come back to some of them. I caught this one, and it kind of caught my eye. So Matthew Masato. I don't know if that's right. If it is wrong, I apologize, Matthew. But Matthew, I think I got that part right. Just found monopore eating nudibranchs. What should be the first step? What do you think?
This is a tough one. So we battled this in the office.
This is one of the most heartbreaking things too. I mean, if you find something that you know is going to cause, like, again, one of my first really successful reef tanks ever was plagued eventually with acro eating flatworms, and I could have just cried. It was an ongoing battle.
Yeah, so did you find Montipora eating flatworms? Because typically nudibranchs is what we use to battle flatworms.
Yeah.
Right. So
my guess is this is flatworms.
Yep.
Which is I get what you're trying to say here, but if it, either way, if they're sequestered on a particular coral, right, then, and you can remove that coral, especially if it's, say, like on a piece of rubber, or if it's a frag or something, get that thing out of there, treat it, dip it, get that stuff off of there if you can. If not, well, you may be up for a battle, but it's doable, right? There are a lot of aquariums, very nice aquariums, even here in the BRS building, that have flatworms that you just got to keep up on them, and you can beat them back. But
yeah, here's a daily reminder to dip your coral, because we have a lot of tanks here, and we share a lot of coral here, and you can tell the people who have dipped the coral before spreading from tank to tank, and the people who haven't, because we spread that all over the place.
Yeah.
But yeah, nudibranchs would be my first go-to. I've honestly not had success with anything else. There's a place online that sells them that we use. I can't remember the name. There's not a lot of vendors for them, though.
I mean, a great solution, again, just staying on top of it. If you have room for a small wrasse in your aquarium, throw like a 6-line or something like that in there. Get yourself a nice, anyway, just if you already have a wrasse, just, they'll help out a lot, but give them a hand, get like a turkey baster or something like that, and kind of puff and blow those flatworms off of the coral. It'll get them out in the water column, and your fish are going to eat them, right? Especially those wrasses and things like that. So maybe an uphill battle for you, maybe something that you always have to deal with, but there are some other products out there. Again, go online, look up stuff. There's lots and lots of videos out there about acro eating flatworms and monopore eating flatworms. So just go out there, look, find a solution that works best for you, because it may, again, it's going to be case by case. What's your bioload? How much coral do you have in there? Can you remove the coral? Is this a small tank? Is that, so everything plays into the way you handle this problem. So just really do your research, get out there and take a look at it.
Yep, I would just go straight to nudibranchs, to be honest. I've tried so many different things unsuccessfully and just waste a bunch of time. So if you have or haven't yet already, just nudibranchs, that's your key. What else do we have? Reef Dode. What are the effects of polluted air on reef tanks?
Great question.
I'm looking right at you.
Yeah, right. Yeah, that's a great question. And I don't necessarily know. I mean, if you think about it, anything that's in the air is going to get into your aquarium, right? Yep. If you're just with that exposure, especially if you're doing any type of work around the house or dust, everything else is going to get into that aquarium, and it's going to affect your water. If you've got a protein skimmer, that air, you're forcing that air into the water to an extent. So you're going to get some of that pollutant into that water. Now, I don't know what pollutant in particular you're talking about and how bad it is. For the most part, I can't imagine your typical air pollutants that we have around here or just, in general, causing too much of a detrimental effect to your aquarium, unless it's a long buildup over time, or there's something like I know I did some, I had an aquarium once where some people ended up coming in and they cut some concrete blocks out to put a window in a basement once, right? And some of that concrete dust got into my aquarium, and it caused a major problem, right? Killed a lot of stuff, actually. So depending on what it is, you're going to have a different effect. But I mean, I can't say for sure, but yeah, I'd say it could definitely affect.
There's no way to get around it entirely, because the air is going to exchange with the display tank no matter. I would say if you have like a lot of if there's something specific you're trying to battle, like Brian mentioned, you can throw like a canister reactor on the air inlet of your skimmer to try and mitigate some of it. Again, it's not going to get everything, but you could do that. Like my first tank was in a 1-bedroom apartment that was basically smaller than where you see us right now. So like every time I cooked and there was smoke, like if you're searing meat or something like that, that's something that I guess you could be concerned about. I don't know. If you have major concerns, put some carbon on the air inlet of your skimmer. Otherwise, unless it's something super serious, I probably wouldn't worry about it.
Yep, I agree with that. Here's a good one I like too, but no, great question. So, little Dina one. I want to move Xenia from rock and fragate so I can back wall it. All right. Your call. Any suggestions to get it stuck to frags? Yeah, so different things you can use. The two things I guess I found the best, I've done different things in the past, from rubber bands and stuff, those I don't like. I would use tiny little plastic zip ties or just fishing line. Fishing line, I think, has worked the best for me in the past. So just, you don't even have to tie it. You just give it a few good wraps around your frag rock and, give it a week or so, and she probably gets stuck pretty well.
Yep, just some thin fishing line. That's all I've ever used.
Yep.
That's the way to go. All right. Crapper says, best return pump flow rate.
Best return pump flow rate. The return pump flow rate really doesn't matter that much, right? Unless you're trying to double your return pump flow rate for, to add flow to your aquarium, right?
And don't do that.
It's a bad idea, right? Really, the return pump is just to get water back up to your aquarium from your sump. That's all the purpose it serves. If it can double as a little bit of flow, great. You can throw a conductor on there and you can get a little extra boost out of it or something like that, fine. But you really shouldn't be focusing on that. The key is the correct flow rate for your return pump is whatever your overflow can keep up with.
Yeah,
right?
That's a good point.
And probably dial it back a little bit behind that. So you don't ever want to outpace your overflow. So whatever it can handle, a little bit less than that, and that's probably the best return flow rate.
When I first started, it was typically, I think we said like 7 to 10 times turnover rate.
Yeah.
So like if you don't have an overflow, if you're looking to
that may be
purchase
what they're
an
talking about,
overflow.
return rate, like the turnover. Yeah.
So we typically said 7 to 10 times. We've reduced that quite a bit. Honestly, I shoot for more like a 5 times because we want to, again, as Brian was talking about, don't rely on your return pump or flow. Rely on power heads for that. Keep it slow. Increase the contact time with your equipment. And you save a little money. Get a little bit smaller pump. But I would shoot for around 5 times, and you need to factor in your plumbing and head height when you do that.
Yep.
So if you're trying to get 500 gallons per hour, it might take a 1,000 gallon per hour pump.
Sure. Yeah, and that's my big key to it is just as long as you're not, as long as you're giving all that water plenty of time in the sump, it's more important that it gets down there, spends time around the algae that's, in the refugium or whatever the case may be, give it time to actually, get filtered out before you send it back home.
Exactly. All right. I think we got time for one more here. I'm going to let you pick it. You do the honors.
Oh, man. Okay, let's see here. I'll try this. My then clownfish got skewered. This is Arbor Press.
Oh, no.
This looks like an interesting question, so I'm going for it. My then clownfish got skewered by an urchin overnight while she was asleep. What's the craziest thing you witnessed in the hobby? Oof, the craziest, that's an interesting one. I've never seen a fish get skewered by an urchin. I've seen them get skewered by spearing mantis shrimp, right? But never an urchin. So that's really interesting. What's the craziest thing you've ever seen in the hobby? Because I'm going through my years of
I don't know if it's crazy. I will give you a very unfortunate situation that happened to me here. If you've watched BRStv over the years, you've seen the tank. It was a 60-gallon cube. I was running Zeovit with metal halide lighting. It was a phenomenal tank. And I had something wreck that tank. The problem with that is that the coral all looked so good that I had already spread that coral through a majority of tanks here in the office and thus killed a majority of coral in the entirety of BRS.
Ouch.
And to this day, we still don't know what it was.
You were patient zero, though.
I was the start of it. So that was, sometimes it happens.
Aquarium COVID.
Yeah, something, I don't know. It was slow too. Yeah, so the most unfortunate thing that's happened to me is that. Nothing really crazier though.
Yeah, crazy stuff. That's kind of hard because I've been doing this for a while and both setting up tanks.
Time. He's been doing this a long time.
Ages.
He's been here a long time.
We get it. Yeah.
Okay.
So, and from setting up other people's tanks, working in LFS, having my own aquariums, all that. So, lots of crazy stuff. I'll piggyback on you. Some of the saddest stuff I know. Or most unfortunate things that have ever happened. I've had tank crashes before. That's just terrible. One of the things that sticks out, actually, for some reason, popped in my head. The LFS that I worked at as a high school and college student, as a youngster.
Many years ago.
We had this great like floor tank, like basin tank, right? And there was this pink-tailed triggerfish that was in it, and he was super cool. He was big, but he loved to be scratched on the side. So he'd actually come up to the surface of the water, and you sit there and you just scratch his side. You could actually push him down onto a rock and just sit there and pet him, and he'd just sit there and let you do it, right? He was in there for years and years and years. Everybody come in there and pet the pink tilter, and then one day he jumped out. It was like the saddest thing ever. It's like that's terrible, right? Just heartbreaking, because you're just like, but he was in there forever. Like, why? Like, why now? He was just like, that's it. I've had it. I've had enough people petting me.
All right, so 2 very unfortunate situations.
Yeah. Sorry to end on a sad note.
Yours could have been solved with a screen net top.
It was a very, very
From one of our
large,
earlier
like, basin tank. So, yeah.
All right.
Anyway.
Well, this is super cool. I had a lot of fun.
Yeah, this was great.
Yeah, this is like our first time doing it. Thank you, everyone who joined us, who asked questions.
Don't forget.
Yep. Well, it's almost over now.
It's almost over.
But we'll definitely be doing this again. We'll see you guys later.
Thanks a lot.